Bachari was the birthplace of the poet Khalil Gibran. Pity the nation divided into fragments, he wrote in 1934, each fragment deeming itself a nation. For a country shattered by factions and feuds just 5 years ago, there's an astonishing absence of rancour today. But even in sleepy Bachari, you don't have to look far for evidence of that fragmentation.
Although there wasn't actually any fighting in this village during the Civil War, the community was touched by the hostilities nonetheless. About 360 men from a population of 12,000 were killed fighting for the various Christian militias.
The war ended because everyone simply became weary of the killing, I was told by those Lebanese who haven't yet fully erased it from the memory. Renewal, rebuilding and moving forward are now national obsessions. And so is promenading along the Corniche in West Beirut on a Sunday afternoon, a tradition predating the war, when the city was the most glamorous, carefree resort in the Eastern Mediterranean. The only factionalism you'll find today is rooted in which team you support. The motto of the new Beirut could be make money, not war. Hamra Street, chattering and rattling with the din of commerce, is the main shopping area. There's no shortage of stores along here whose swankiness wouldn't go unremarked in Paris or Geneva. Bizarrely, not only did many of them survive the bombardment by Israeli, Syrian and Christian forces, they stayed open throughout. And the old money is coming home, particularly to the homes of the wealthy up in the hills. Madam Myrna Boustani, hotelier and the first woman MP, typifies the rich, cosmopolitan Lebanese who've returned to reopen their businesses with robust quantities of cash and a fragile optimism.
I mean, we see these conflicts taking place all over the world. And in Lebanon, it was really very painful for us all because we live as mixed communities all together, very cosmopolitan. In a way, we are East and West. East and West meet here. We have both culture meeting here. And unfortunately, these 17 years of war have given us another image. 5 years' time, the year 2000, I think it would have improved a lot, but it would take more than 5 years.
This is a photograph of Martyrs Square in the centre of the old town of West Beirut, taken in the early 1960s. Bustling, glamorous, cosmopolitan. And this is Martyrs Square today, after the war. The only building that's still standing is the old Opera Cinema House. The statue's still there, just about. Lost a few limbs, taken a bit of shrapnel. All these palm trees have been blown away. In fact, the only tree that's still standing is that one across there, and see how much smaller it was.
The streets around Rue Foch were one of the more fashionable parts of town, until they formed the front line between snipers of an increasingly bewildering confusion of militias. Foreign companies are now competing for contracts to restore these fine old buildings, gnawed to the bone by gunfire.
It's hard to imagine on a quiet and beautiful morning like this, the violence, the noise, and the amount of flying metal that did this to Beirut. But perhaps the most tragic thing is, if you were to ask any of the people who once occupied these seats in this cinema in Beirut, very few of them would be able to tell you why it started, what it was about, and what it achieved. I've just read 626 pages of Robert Fisk, and I'm more confused now than when I started.
If the Lebanese are busy forgetting the war, they're just as busy recalling what fun they had before it. And inviting the rest of the world to join in the post-war party brings in the dollars necessary for Lebanon to pull itself back up.
وهاون وعندنا مطعم اوتيل هوني منامة اوتيل مطعم الارز هون منامة قعدة حلوة ديسكو ناس كلاب تقعدوا البنات والشباب ينبسطوا عندنا هون وكل الحاجات المريحة موجودة كل شيء بس اليوم ما في عجوة يوم أحد وسبت في ناس كتير هون وأهلا فيكم.
There is, of course, a constant army presence, even, as with these trainees, on the ski slopes. Beginners are welcome, those who've never skied before, and those who never will.
Below me, to the east, is the flat plain of the Bekaa Valley. And beyond that, Syria. This is the road to Damascus. Biblically synonymous, of course, with blinding, instantaneous, spiritual conversions. Do you know that Phil Collins? He makes really stimulating records, and Michael Howard's basically a decent bloke. Blimey.
The very name of the Bekaa Valley used to set foreigners a-trembling. This was kidnap country and the scene of some of the heaviest Israeli bombardment. Israel still occupies illegally part of southern Lebanon, ostensibly to keep this kind of caper away from its borders. Hezbollah gunmen patrol the Bekaa under the gaze of powerful and competing icons. The trip through Hezbollah checkpoints and Syrian army roadblocks is rewarded with the splendours of the gigantic ruins at Baalbek, some of the finest in the Middle East. Now accessible again, they're ripe for tourist exploitation.
This is the Roman temple of Bacchus, which was built in 60 AD and subsequently destroyed by an earthquake. And this was also the stage for the Baalbek festival, which was very famous in the 50s and 60s, but they had to stop having them when the Civil War started in 1975. But on these steps are performed on different occasions Ella Fitzgerald, the Bolshoi Ballet, Von Karajan and Margot Fontaine danced here as well. They're hoping to revive the festival in a year or two.
There's an old tourism cliche about the Lebanon which says you can be skiing in the morning, or sledging in my case, and swimming in the afternoon. Now, this is problematic because the Lebanon doesn't have very many beaches. This is one of the prettier parts of the coastline, the ancient port at Byblos. Byblos is the origin of the word Bible. 3,000 years ago, the Egyptians sailed here for cedarwood and traded it for papyrus to make biblion, or books. The Crusaders built the harbour, and the ancient city was also the birthplace of town planning, something with which the Lebanese have had a bit of difficulty since. But Byblos became really famous in the 1950s and 60s when movie stars and dodgy dictators did the twist and the cha-cha-cha in the chic hideaway of Pepe Abed's fishing club. And they didn't do a right lot of fishing.
Jacques Chirac, Brigitte Bardot, Marlon Brando, Dolly Burns, Lawrence Harvey and Anne Margaret, and our old friend Sir George Young, Anita Ekberg, Ray Milan. I think my mother had a thing about him. David Niven, Jean Bedel Bokassa, the cannibal emperor of the Central African Republic. I wonder what they gave him for main course. What if there's no photos of Ron Goodwin?
Beirut was once a byword for nightlife, jet-setting and international entertainment, whatever that is. It'll be a long time before it again becomes the chosen playground of pouting French starlets and playboy princes, but reconstruction is underway. In fact, Beirut rivals Berlin as the world's biggest building site. But some areas won't be rebuilt. Just off Martyrs Square, a bomb site will become an archaeological plaza. For historians, the war brought some unlikely benefits, as the ancient past was exposed by modern warfare.
We must be realistic, because in the ancient time, Beirut was destroyed 26 times. And in 6,000 and 10,000 years, I think that it's a little episode of the history of humanity. There must be building destroyed, there must be building rebuilt, and all this make perhaps the matters of the archaeologists of the third millennium.
And Beirut expects to burst into the third millennium with its reputation restored as the mighty business capital of the Middle East. The militias have checked out of the downtown headquarters, and the government has now launched a $14 billion reconstruction program, attracting foreign investment and engineers. It's a city back from the dead, gateway to 3 continents, and according to marketing men, the ancient city of the future. But it'll be some time yet before they crank up the projector at the Opera House, and Ron Goodwin contemplates that long-awaited follow-up album.